Every suburb looks the same at night. Rows of houses, identical rooftops, neat driveways, and streetlights buzzing with that dull orange glow. You can drive through 10 different neighborhoods in Ohio and swear you've been going in circles. They're supposed to look safe, predictable. That's the illusion of the suburbs, that nothing bad could ever happen where the lawns are trimmed, the mailboxes shine, and the neighbors wave politely when you walk your dog. But sometimes, if you pay close enough attention, you'll notice the house that doesn't belong. For John, it was the one right next door. At first, it didn't seem strange. A moving truck came one afternoon in early spring. A single man, tall, pale, quiet, brought in a few pieces of furniture. No family, no boxes, no friends helping him unload. Just him. And when the truck drove off, the neighborhood expected the usual things. Porch lights at night, a car in the driveway, maybe a hello or two across the fence. But none of that happened. The curtains stayed drawn. No lights ever came on, not even at dinner time. Days passed, then weeks, and the house sat there in total darkness. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was abandoned. Except every night, John swore he saw the faint outline of someone moving past the windows. The kind of movement that doesn't belong to shadows. At first, Melissa, his wife, laughed it off. Not everyone's a friendly neighbor, John. He's probably just private. And maybe she was right. But Katie, their teenage daughter, said something that made John's skin crawl. She claimed that one night, while brushing her teeth, she looked out her second-story window and saw the man standing in their backyard. Not doing anything. Just staring straight at her. What do you do when your kid tells you that? Do you tell them it's their imagination? Or do you admit you're starting to notice the same thing? Every suburb looks the same at night. Quiet, peaceful, safe. But that's only if you don't notice the wrong house on the block. The one where the lights never turn on. The one with the neighbor who never seems to leave through the front door. The one that makes you wonder, what if the person living there isn't really a person at all? Because John was about to find out. And once he knew the truth about the neighbor next door, he'd wish he never noticed that house to begin with. John Carter always believed their neighborhood in Dublin, Ohio, was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted their lives to finally settle down. The lawns were well kept, the kids rode bikes up and down the cul-de-sacs, and people actually waved to each other when they took out the trash. It wasn't perfect, but compared to the years he and Melissa had spent living in noisy apartments with paper-thin walls and late-night sirens, it felt like heaven. The Carters had lived on Meadowbrook Lane for just under 6 years. John worked in IT for a small insurance firm downtown. Melissa taught second grade at the local elementary school. And their 16-year-old daughter Katie was in that restless stage where she wanted freedom but still relied on her parents for rides, money, and approval. It was ordinary, safe. Until the day the house next door got a new resident. It was a gray Saturday in early spring when a moving truck rumbled up to the empty house on the corner. John had just finished mowing the lawn when he noticed it idling out front, engine humming. He leaned on the handle of the mower and waited, expecting to see a family climb out. Meadowbrook Lane was a family street. SUVs, tricycles in the driveways, chalk drawings smeared across sidewalks. Instead, only one man stepped out. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, and so pale that even from across the yard John noticed the contrast against his dark jacket. No movers, no friends, no kids tumbling out of the back seat. Just him. The man didn't unload much. A mattress still wrapped in plastic. A single wooden chair. A small box he carried carefully, like it held something fragile. That was it. John found it odd, but not necessarily alarming. Some people traveled light. Some people started over. By late afternoon, the moving truck was gone, and the man's car, if he had one, was nowhere to be seen. The driveway sat empty. Melissa noticed too. She had that instinct every good teacher carried. curiosity mixed with a bit of nosiness. By Monday evening, she had baked a batch of oatmeal cookies. "I'll take them over," she said, sliding the warm tray onto the counter. "It's what neighbors do." John smirked. He doesn't look like the cookie-eating type. Melissa shot him a look. "Everyone eats cookies, John. Besides, Katie's been dying for me to make these. If he doesn't take them, she will." So Melissa packed half the batch into a tin, slipped on her sneakers, and crossed the lawn. John watched from the front porch, arms folded, pretending not to care but curious all the same. She knocked. Once. Twice. She even rang the bell. Nothing. Melissa leaned, peering at the drawn curtains. Then she shrugged, left the tin on the porch, and walked back. "No answer?" John asked. "Nope," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. "But I know someone's in there. I could hear footsteps after I knocked." John frowned. "Maybe he just doesn't like cookies." Melissa shook her head. "Nobody hates cookies." The next morning, the tin was gone. At first, the Carters chalked it up to shyness. Some people weren't neighborly. That was fine. But over the next few weeks, John couldn't help noticing things that didn't add up. For one, the curtains never opened. Not in the kitchen, not in the living room, not even in the upstairs windows. The house stayed sealed tight, like whoever lived there didn't want the sun to touch them. At night, no lights ever came on. Not even a dim hallway glow, not the flicker of a television. The place sat in darkness, so complete it stood out from every other house on the block. And then there was the driveway. Empty. Always empty. No car pulled in. No garage door ever opened. The man had to get groceries, had to go to work, right? But if he did, nobody saw it. Sometimes, John swore he saw movement behind those curtains. Just the shift of a shadow, the faintest ripple as if someone had brushed too close. But it was always quick, fleeting enough that he wondered if it was his imagination. Katie, on the other hand, wasn't so quick to dismiss it. "Mom," she whispered one night at dinner, "I don't like him." Melissa sighed, passing the potatoes. "You don't even know him." "That's the point," Katie shot back. "Nobody does." John glanced at his daughter. "What makes you say that?" She hesitated, then leaned in, voice low. "Last night, I was brushing my teeth. I looked out the window, and I swear I saw him. In our backyard. Just standing there." Melissa put down her fork. "Katie, I'm serious. He wasn't moving, he wasn't doing anything. Just standing. Looking up. At me." The room went quiet. John finally said, "You probably imagined it. Or maybe it was just a shadow. Streetlight, tree branch, something like that." But the look in Katie's eyes made him uneasy. She wasn't joking. The neighborhood whispered too. Melissa heard from another teacher down the street that nobody had seen the man come or go. One neighbor swore she'd walked past at midnight and heard faint noises inside, like humming or maybe whispering, but the windows were black. Another neighbor, an older man who walked his dog every morning at 5, claimed he'd seen the curtains twitch just before sunrise. But when he waved, nobody waved back. The Carters weren't the only ones who felt it, that the house next door wasn't right. And yet, life went on. School, work, mowing lawns, barbecues. People stopped talking about it. They accepted it as one of those suburban oddities you learn to live with. A recluse, a night shift worker, someone who didn't care about neighborly small talk. John tried to accept it too, but every time he stepped outside after dark, he felt it, the weight of that house beside his own. Occupied, but empty. Silent, but not still. He told himself he was imagining it. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. Because sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, he could hear it too. Faint, measured footsteps pacing behind those closed curtains. 4 weeks after Katie's confession, John tried to convince himself that life on Meadowbrook Lane was still ordinary. He went to work, sat through endless meetings, came home tired, ate dinner with his family, watched TV, went to bed. The neighbor's house stayed dark and silent, curtains sealed tight. On the surface, nothing had changed. But late at night, when the rest of the house was asleep, John found himself staring out the bedroom window. Not every night, not deliberately, but often enough that it became a quiet habit. He'd stand there in the dark, arms folded, looking at the black silhouette of the house next door. At first, there was nothing to see, just shadows, stillness. Then he started noticing it. The man had a schedule. It was around 3:12 the first night John caught it. He hadn't been able to sleep, so he padded over to the window. The street was empty, the houses quiet. Then, movement. The neighbor's front door cracked open. The pale man slipped out silently, no flashlight, no phone, nothing in his hands. He didn't get into a car. There was none. Instead, he walked down the driveway and across the street, vanishing into the line of trees that bordered the neighborhood. John checked the clock. 3:12 a.m. By the time the sky lightened, the man was back. John didn't see him return, but when he looked again around 5:30, there he was, slipping inside just before dawn. It happened again the next night. And the next. Always between 3 and 4 in the morning. Always back before the sun came up. At breakfast, John brought it up casually. He goes out at night, he said, pouring coffee. Every night. Between 3 and 4. Melissa didn't even look up from buttering toast. He's probably a night shift worker. No, John said firmly. He doesn't drive. He just walks. Into the woods. That got her attention. She frowned, setting down the knife. Into the woods. At that hour. John nodded. Melissa shook her head. Still. Maybe he works nearby. Maybe he walks to catch a bus. People do that, you know. John bristled. At 3 in the morning? Every single night. Melissa gave him a look. You're letting this get to you. He's just different. Not everyone has to live like us. John didn't reply, but in his gut he knew. This wasn't normal. By the 4th night, John had a notebook. He sat up in bed, careful not to wake Melissa, and watched through the curtains. When the man left, John jotted it down. The exact time. The way he moved. How long he was gone. 3:07. 3:41. 3:22. Always precise. Always returning before dawn. The pages began to fill with numbers, lines, arrows. John wasn't even sure what he was looking for. Just a pattern, some kind of explanation. By the end of the week, one thing was clear. The man never missed a night. Katie didn't know about the notebook. But one evening, while Melissa was grading papers at the kitchen table, she pulled her dad aside. "Dad," she whispered, eyes darting to make sure her mom wasn't listening. "I saw him again." John's stomach tightened. "Where?" "In the backyard." Her voice trembled. "Same as before." He was just standing there, looking up. At me. John felt his throat dry out. "When was this?" "Last night," she said. "Around." "I don't know." "After midnight." I woke up to use the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw him through the blinds. John clenched his jaw. "Did he move?" "No," Katie whispered. "He didn't move at all. Just stared." She shivered. It didn't feel like he was looking at the house. It felt like he was looking at me. John put a hand on her shoulder. "Don't tell your mom, okay? She'll just say it's nothing. But you keep your blinds closed. Always. Promise me." Katie nodded, but her eyes were wide with fear. From then on, John barely slept. He'd stay up, sitting in the dark by the window, waiting. The routine never changed. The man left between 3 and 4, melted into the woods, and came back before the sun touched the horizon. But now John watched the backyard too. Some nights it was empty. Other nights, when the branches swayed just right, He thought he saw him. Not moving. Not walking. Just standing. Too still to be natural. Too deliberate to be accident. Once, John crept downstairs and peeked through the back door's glass pane. And for a split second, he swore he saw a pale face turned up toward Katie's window. John started snapping at work. He was distracted, tired, late on projects. His boss pulled him aside, asking if everything was okay. John lied, said he wasn't sleeping well. Melissa noticed too. She asked him one night, "Why are you obsessing over this? You're keeping notes like some kind of detective. You're scaring Katie." John snapped back. "Katie is scared. Because she's seen him too. She told me." Melissa froze. She? What? John regretted saying it immediately. Katie had begged him not to tell. Melissa's face softened. "Honey, teenagers imagine things. She probably saw a shadow, or dreamed it. The brain plays tricks." John slammed the notebook shut. "No, this isn't imagination. He's out there. Every night. And it's not right." Melissa sighed, pressing her fingers to her temples. "You're turning this into something it's not." But John wasn't so sure anymore. Days turned into weeks. The pattern never broke. Every night, the neighbor left between 3 and 4. Every morning, he returned before dawn. His driveway stayed empty. His house stayed dark. His curtains stayed drawn. And yet, somehow, the Carters could feel him. Katie started sleeping with her door locked. Melissa stopped looking out the kitchen window altogether. And John, he barely slept at all. Sometimes, when the house was quiet and his family was asleep, John sat in the dark living room, staring out at the neighbor's house. And he swore, even when the man wasn't there, that someone was staring back. John lasted 3 more nights before he broke. 3 nights of the same routine. The man slipping out of his house between 3 and 4 in the morning, disappearing into the trees at the edge of the neighborhood. 3 nights of John standing at his window, notebook in hand, watching the darkness swallow him whole. The mystery had dug its claws into him. The pattern was too precise, too deliberate. No normal man lived like that. And if Katie was right, if the neighbor had really been standing in their backyard, staring into her window, then it wasn't just weird. It was dangerous. So on the 4th night, John decided to follow him. He didn't tell Melissa. He didn't tell Katie. He just waited. He sat in the living room with the lights off, heart pounding, watching through the blinds. At 3:18 a.m., right on schedule, the neighbor's door opened. The pale man stepped out into the night, closing it softly behind him. No flashlight, no bag, no car. Just him. John slipped on his jacket and shoes, grabbed a small flashlight, though he didn't dare turn it on, and eased the front door open. The night air was damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. The man was already moving. Long strides. Straight toward the woods. John followed. The streetlights ended quickly, and soon the only light came from the moon hanging pale above the trees. The neighborhood fell silent behind him. John kept his distance, careful to step where the grass muffled his shoes. The man never turned around. He just walked, unhurried, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The woods loomed ahead, black and dense. John hesitated at the tree line. He should turn back, he thought. He should go home, crawl into bed, pretend none of this was happening. But then he thought of Katie, of her pale face when she whispered that he'd been watching her, and he stepped into the trees. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. No rustle of animals. No chirping crickets. Just the steady crunch of leaves beneath the man's boots. John followed deeper, his pulse hammering in his ears. He stayed far enough back that he could duck behind trees if the man glanced over his shoulder. But he never did. He just kept walking deeper and deeper, until the houses were gone, swallowed by the night. Finally, they reached a small clearing. Moonlight spilled across the ground, silver against the damp earth. The man stopped. John froze behind a tree, holding his breath. For a long moment, the man just stood there. Then, slowly, he shrugged off his jacket and let it fall to the ground. And that was when John saw it. The man lifted his hands to his face. At first, John thought he was scratching, rubbing his eyes, maybe adjusting his skin. But then his fingers hooked under the flesh of his jaw and pulled. The skin peeled back like wet paper. John's stomach lurched. He clamped a hand over his mouth to keep from gasping. The man, no, the thing, was stripping off its face. The pale mask of human skin stretched, folded, peeled away, revealing something beneath. The moonlight hit slick, dark flesh. Too smooth, too wet, like the surface of raw muscle. The features twisted, jaw elongating, eyes sinking deeper into hollow sockets. It wasn't a man at all. It had never been a man. The human face dangled in its hand like a mask made of wax. Slowly, carefully, the creature laid it across the jacket on the ground. John's knees shook. His breath came fast, shallow. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream. But terror pinned him in place. All those weeks of strangeness, the drawn curtains, the empty driveway, the midnight walks into the woods, it all made sense now. The neighbor wasn't hiding. He was pretending to be human. John's mind raced. How long had it been there? Why here, in this quiet Ohio suburb? And what did it do when it disappeared into the woods every night? His pen and notebook flashed in his mind. All those neat rows of times, all those unanswered questions. None of it mattered now. The truth was staring him in the face. And then, the creature's head tilted. Not toward the ground. Not toward the sky. Toward him. John's chest seized. He hadn't made a sound. He hadn't moved. He was hidden behind a thick oak, heart hammering so loudly he swore it must echo through the clearing. And yet, the thing knew. Its wet, glistening face turned slowly, unnaturally, scanning the trees. Its nostrils flared, lips parting to reveal teeth that weren't teeth at all, long, uneven ridges like shards of broken bone. John pressed his back to the tree, eyes squeezed shut. Don't breathe. Don't move. Don't even think. He waited. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. They crunched across the clearing, closer to his hiding spot. John's entire body screamed at him to run, but his legs were cement. Closer. Closer. The sound stopped. John's throat tightened. He couldn't stop himself. His lungs begged for air, and a small, sharp inhale escaped him. The silence that followed was absolute. He risked it. Just a glance. Just enough to see. And there it was. The creature stood no more than 10 feet away, head tilted at an impossible angle, its mask of skin lying forgotten on the ground behind it. Its eyes, or the dark pits where eyes should have been, seemed to drink in the moonlight. And then, slowly, it smiled. Not with lips. With the entire lower half of its face, splitting wider and wider until the grin stretched too far to be human. John stumbled back, leaves crunching beneath him. The thing twitched, jerked, as if deciding whether to lunge. For one horrifying heartbeat, John thought it would. Then, suddenly, it turned. Without a sound, it stooped, picked up the discarded mask, and pressed it back against its slick face. The flesh clung, smoothed, settled until once again a pale man stood in the clearing, adjusting his jacket as though nothing had happened. And then, he walked away, back toward the neighborhood. John collapsed against the tree, trembling. His heart felt like it might burst through his ribs. He stayed there long after the man was gone, too afraid to move. The night air pressed down on him, cold and suffocating. Every sound, every crack of a twig, every whisper of wind, felt like it belonged to the thing in the clearing. Finally, when the sky began to lighten and the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, John forced himself up. His legs were weak, his body shaking. He stumbled home in silence, praying he wouldn't hear footsteps behind him. When he reached his house, Melissa and Katie were still asleep. The world looked normal, ordinary, but John knew better now. The neighbor wasn't a man. And the worst part, it knew he was watching. John didn't remember how he got home. 1 minute, he was frozen in the woods, staring at the pale imitation of a man as it peeled off its face. The next, he was stumbling up his driveway, lungs burning, heart pounding, hands trembling like he'd sprinted for miles. He hadn't run. He'd barely been able to move, but his body carried the memory of terror like a fever. When he shut the front door behind him, he slid down against it, gasping for air. His palms were slick with sweat. He pressed them against the floor, grounding himself in the familiar creak of the wood, the faint scent of Melissa's lavender candles lingering from the night before. This was his house, his safe place. His family slept upstairs, warm in their beds, unaware of what lurked just beyond the trees. But even here, in the heart of his home, John felt no safety. By sunrise, he had made up his mind. Melissa had to know. When she shuffled into the kitchen in her robe, hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep, John was already at the table, hunched over, clutching a mug of coffee gone cold. "You're up early," she said softly, rubbing her eyes. He looked at her with hollow eyes. "We're not safe." Melissa froze. "What are you talking about?" "The neighbor," John whispered. He's not a person, Mel. I followed him last night. Into the woods." Her brow furrowed. "John." "I saw him take his face off." His voice cracked. Like a mask. Underneath, it wasn't human. It was God. I don't even have the words for it. But it's not a man. Melissa blinked at him, searching his face for some trace of a joke. But he wasn't joking. He was pale, trembling, desperate. "John," she sighed, "you've been obsessing over this for weeks. You're not sleeping. You're writing down times in a notebook like some kind of detective. I'm telling you the truth." He slammed his hand on the table. Coffee sloshed. Upstairs, a door creaked. "Katie." John lowered his voice. "Please, just believe me. For once." Melissa rubbed her temples. "Even if you think you saw something, even if it scared you, it doesn't mean what you believe it means. People don't just take off their faces." John's chest tightened. He wanted to scream. He wanted to drag her out into the woods, show her the clearing, show her the damp earth where the mask had been laid. But he knew, by daylight, it would all look normal. Just trees. Just shadows. He slumped forward, exhausted. Melissa stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Get some rest, John. Please." But rest wouldn't come. Not anymore. That evening, John tried to act normal. He helped with dinner. He asked Katie about her homework. He watched TV with Melissa, pretending to care about the sitcom laugh track buzzing from the screen. But inside, he was counting down the hours. He knew the schedule now. He knew when it would happen. 3 o'clock came. His hands shook. He couldn't sit still. At 3:12 a.m., he stood in the hallway, staring at the front door. He told himself he was being paranoid. That maybe Melissa was right. Maybe he'd imagined the whole thing. Then, knock, knock, knock. The sound was soft but deliberate. 3 slow raps that echoed through the quiet house. John froze. Melissa stirred upstairs. A door clicked. Katie, maybe, shifting in her sleep. But the house stayed still otherwise, wrapped in silence. Another knock. Louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. John's breath caught. His heart slammed against his ribs. His feet carried him forward, slow and unwilling, until he was standing at the door. His hand trembled as he reached for the peephole. He pressed his eye to the glass, and nearly screamed. The man stood on the porch. No jacket, no mask dangling from his hands this time. Just him, pale, silent, still. But it wasn't his neighbor's face staring back at him. It was his own. John's stomach dropped. The face on the other side of the door was his. His tired eyes, his unshaven jaw, his lips pressed into the same grim line he'd seen in the mirror just hours before. The creature wore him perfectly, like it had studied him, like it had been waiting for this moment. The only difference was the smile. It stretched wider than his own could. Too wide. The lips pulled back unnaturally, teeth bared in a grotesque grin. John stumbled back from the door, clutching his chest. The knocking resumed. Knock, knock, knock. But now it wasn't a hand hitting wood. It was slower, heavier, like the dull thud of bone. John. Melissa's voice drifted down the stairs. He spun, frantic. Don't come down. But she was already on the steps, robe tied tight, eyes heavy with sleep. What's going on? He held up a shaking hand. Don't open the door. Don't even look. Melissa frowned. Why? Who's out there? Another knock rattled the doorframe. John's voice broke. It's me. Out there. It's wearing my face. Melissa stared at him like he'd lost his mind. I mean it, he said desperately. Please. Believe me. But Melissa shook her head. You're scaring me, John. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was worse. John crept to the peephole again, every nerve in his body screaming not to. Nothing. The porch was empty. He sagged against the door, sweat dripping down his temple. Melissa whispered from the stairs. What did you see? John swallowed hard. His voice came out hoarse. It's gone. But he didn't believe it. He knew deep down that it wasn't gone at all. The rest of the night stretched on like torture. John sat in the living room chair, clutching the flashlight he never turned on, staring at the door. Melissa went back upstairs eventually, muttering something about stress, about needing help. Katie never stirred again. But John didn't move. At 3:47 a.m., he heard footsteps on the porch. Slow. Heavy. They didn't knock this time. They just paced back and forth, like something waiting patiently to be let inside. When dawn finally came, the sound stopped. The porch was empty again. But John knew what he'd seen. He knew what had stood on the other side of the door. And he knew one thing for certain. The house next door wasn't hiding anymore. It was watching. And now it wanted in. They say the suburbs are safe. White fences, trimmed lawns, neighbors you wave at on your way to work. But safety is an illusion. It's something we convince ourselves of because it's easier than admitting the truth. The truth is, sometimes you don't really know who lives next door. John thought he knew. He thought he was just being paranoid, tracking the strange man's movements, staring too long at the dark windows of that silent house. But when you see something that wears your face, when you realize it's been studying you, mimicking you, paranoia turns into reality. And reality is much, much worse. Because if it can look like you, how long before it decides to replace you? How long before your wife, your daughter, your friends can't tell the difference? What happens when you knock on your own door, and no one inside realizes the person they're letting in isn't you at all? That's the part John couldn't say out loud. And maybe that's why you should think twice the next time you notice a house where the curtains never move. The one with no lights on at night. The one that looks empty, but you know it isn't. Every suburb looks the same at night. Quiet, peaceful, safe. Until you notice the one house that doesn't belong. You don't really know who lives next door. And sometimes, you really don't want to. Now let me ask you something. If you were John, if you discovered that your neighbor wasn't human, what would you do? Would you confront them? Would you pack up your family and move, leaving everything behind just to escape? Or would you stay, watching from your window every night, waiting for the knock you know is coming? I want to hear your answer. Drop it down in the comments. I'll be reading. And if stories like this keep you up at night, wondering what's on the other side of the wall, or who's watching through the glass, make sure to subscribe. Because this was just one nightmare. The next one might be worse. Until then, sleep well. If you can.